Welcome back. In this lesson, I'll give you a quick tour of the form components inside Bootstrap. So you start with a simple component, form, and make sure you add role equals form. And this is for helping with accessibility. Next, every form element along with its label must be included in a div with a class of form group. And this will ensure proper spacing between these elements. So I'm going to have a form group, and inside, well, simple label plus input. So the label is going to be for form element 1, let's say. This is a label. And then input type text, we're going to give it an ID of form element 1, and we're going to give it a class of form control. Okay, let's see it, and there it is. Now, by default, every element with a class of form control has a width of 100%. Of course, you can alter this later on. So let's copy this and paste it. Of course, change the label on the form element, and there it is. And this is the spacing I'm talking about. If I were to remove the form group class, see, there is no bottom margin on these elements. So let's keep it. Now, whenever you're building a form, you might need various snippets of text for help. So for example, if you have a password, you might have a text under that saying, hey, your password needs to be at least 8 characters. So for that, in Bootstrap, you can use a class called help block. And I'm going to use a paragraph help block. This is an example help text. Refresh, and there it is. Now, by using this class, you make sure you have a different style than a normal paragraph. So if I would have a normal paragraph here, yeah, I wouldn't have the proper distance from the element above it, and I would have the default text color. All right, now this is like a default form. You can also have an inline form, which means your elements will be sitting on the same line. And instead of labels, which show up all the time, you would have screen reader only labels. So let me show you how you do that. I'm going to create a new form. Role is going to be, again, form. But this time, I will add a class of form inline. So again, I would start with a div class form group, and I would do a label plus an input. And actually, I'm just going to copy the label and input from the example above, because they have almost the same styling. Change the ID here. The only difference is, on the label, I'm going to add the class of SR only, which means screen reader only. So this text will only be shown on screen readers. So let's duplicate this, and let's add some placeholders here, because since we no longer have labels, the user needs to know what he needs to add in there. So I'm going to say enter email, and then on this one, I'm going to say password. Now let's change this input type to password. Refresh, and there it is. You can also add a button with a type, let's see, of submit. Class is going to be btn, and let's do btn default. Let's say sign in. And notice, oops, btn here. And notice this button is on the same line. And we don't need to put the actual button in a form group. That's only for grouping different elements. You can also add checkboxes here. So for example, to add a checkbox, you would need to create a div with a class of checkbox. And inside, you would have a label. And inside that label, you would have an input type checkbox. And after the input, you would say the text, like remember me. All All right, so this is actually how you create checkboxes in Bootstrap. All right, now there is another type of form, which is the horizontal form, but I'm not going to go over that right here because it would just be repeating what we're doing in the exercise part. So you'll see it a couple of lessons ahead. But for now, I want to talk to you about the validation states. And Bootstrap includes validation styles for error, warning, and success. To use them, you need to add the following classes to the parent elements. So I'm just going to use this first form here. So on the form group, I'm going to add the class of has warning, for example. On the second one, I'm going to add the class of has error, and I'm just going to duplicate this, and I'm going to say has success. So refresh, and notice the border of the elements as well as the help text have changed color. If you want to do the same for the labels, you need to add the class of, so let me do it here, class equals control label. All right, so that will change color as well. So let's add that to the other labels. So there it is, warning, error, and success. If you want, you can also add some optional icons using the glyph icons I showed you in the previous lesson. So you would do something like this. On the form group, you need to add the class of has feedback. So I'm going to add it to all of these, has warning and has feedback. Now, after the input, you would do the span with a class of glyph icon and glyph icon warning sign, for example, and then with a class of form control feedback. Let's see, and there it is. On the other elements, you would do the same, but you would need to change the class of the glyph icon. So, for example, on error, you would say glyph icon remove, because that's the code name for the remove icon, and then glyph icon OK for success. And there it is. Now, if you want to control the size of a particular input, you can use the LG and SM classes that are actually quite familiar by now. So, for example, on this inline form, let's say I want this first input to be large. So I'm going to say input LG. Right, so now it's bigger than a traditional input. And on the second one, input SM, just so you can see the difference. Okay, and this is a small input. If you want to affect how wide a column control is, you need to use the grid columns. So I'll just give you a quick example. Let's see, form. I'm going to do another form here real quick. I'm going to start with a div class row, and then a div class col LG2 plus a col LG3. And inside this one, I'm going to say an input with a class of form control. Input type text. I'm just going to do a placeholder here so you can see the class. So it's col LG2. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to put it right here where it says col LG3. So refresh, and there it is. Now you see this dark background because I'm still using the demo classes to show you the grid system. But without it, and let me just remove my demo area class here. Without it, this is how it looks like. And you can go even further and add as many elements as you want. So in my case, it's col LG7, right? This is how a 3-column form would look like. So that's how you use forms. Pretty straightforward. And although you gotta learn some new class names and HTML structure, these components are very easy to use. In the next lesson, I'll show you a more advanced component, the dropdown. So I'll see you there.